Hi, it's Lara here with your weekly astrology forecast. And this one's for the week of June 24th to the 30th, 2020. Thanks for being here. So this forecast is actually going to stretch throughout the remainder of 2020 for the specific things that I'm going to be talking about, namely Mars entering Aries, which is happening this week, and staying there for the remainder of the year, and going retrograde there. So this is a big deal, and it's going to really flavor the last part of 2020. So it's really important to talk about it. It's really important to take this information in and to possibly, revisit it now and again throughout the rest of 2020. So before I dive into that, there are some other things I want to let you know, and I want to say that I hope you're well. I hope you're safe as always. Thank you for being here as always. I'd be lying if I said that, the craziness of 2020 thus far hasn't gotten to me, because it definitely has. And I wrote on Facebook yesterday, that I was struggling. And although, yes, there are some bright spots, and my sort of higher self, and the part of me that knows the astrology and the sort of higher purpose to all of this, the fact that this is all divinely orchestrated, shall we say, is, I know, and I'm kind of like, okay, this is where we're at. This is where we need to be. Working with this consciously is the way we have to do it to ensure a brighter future for all of us, right? But the part of me that has to live in the here and now, on the day-to-day, the real human part of me is really fed up and afraid, to be honest with you. I have some fears, those are, that's the honest to God truth. And what I've learned over time through many, many crises that I've experienced, is you can't let that stop you from moving forward. You have to keep putting one foot in front of the other. That's what courage is, right? Courage is not lack of fear. Courage is feeling the fear and doing it anyway, right? It's really about allowing yourself to feel what you're feeling, and allowing yourself space for that and honoring those emotions, but then not letting them take you down. So I know sometimes that's easier said than others. Mars is coming in the next few days to help us with that, but we have to be mindful of how we're working with that energy, and I'm going to talk a lot about that in today's video. Before I get there, we have the moon in Leo today, which is the 24th of June, and on Wednesday, right? So moon in Leo energy is big. Leo's go big or go home kind of thing. Leo is about, Leo is very much about loyalty and heart-centered, passion, and really about giving love, but also wanting to receive love and appreciation and all of those things, right? And so on the sort of shadow side, Leo moon can be a little bit melodramatic, a little bit over the top sort of thing, a little bit even childish if it doesn't sort of get its needs met as well. So, but moon and Leo days are quite good for really, letting your light shine, putting yourself out there, like I'm doing here on video, doing something creative, doing something involving children, those sorts of things lend well to moon and Leo days. And then we've got the moon moving into Virgo tomorrow, which is more reserved energy, good time for checking off the ticky boxes, And then it will move into Libra on Saturday, on Scorpio on Monday. And if you have yet to take advantage of my Working with the Moon guide, it's sort of just it's a quick, quick start guide, if you will. It's about a 10-minute audio and a 1-page PDF that can help you get in tune with the moon and what certain, when the moon is in certain signs, what those days lend well to. So you can click the link below and go over to my website and you can grab that there if you haven't yet. What else? What else do we have before we start talking about Mars? So, well, something pretty significant. We have Neptune stationing retrograde yesterday, today kind of thing. So, and Neptune's stationing retrograde at 20 degrees Pisces. And it will travel just because Neptune travels very slowly. So it will move back to 18. It'll only move 2 degrees. Personally, I'm a little bit happy about that because my sun is at 17 degrees Pisces and Neptune was sitting right on my sun for a while. That was a bit of a challenge in many ways, and it's going to get close, but it's not going to come right back there. So I'm good with that. But the thing about Neptune retrograde is it happens every year, right? For about 5 months at a time. So it will be retrograde from now until November 25th. So, this isn't out of the ordinary, and the outer planets, the slower moving planets, this tends to be the case with them, right? The retrogrades of those planets aren't quite as much of a concern. They're not quite as obvious because it's a very regular yearly event that happens over a long span of time. But it is worth noting that Neptune retrograde can have this effect of sort of removing the blinders, removing the rose-colored glasses. It's kind of like if we haven't been seeing things clearly and, we've sort of been, the details have been fuzzy, this is the time when we have an opportunity to get a glimpse of sort of what's really going on. It's like the Wizard of Oz, where the wizard is behind the curtain. And when the curtain's pulled back, right? Neptune retrograde, when the curtain's pulled back, we see what's really there. And that can be a bit disconcerting, even a little, uncomfortable and confusing, and maybe even a bit scary because we thought things were one way, or we might have been sort of fooling ourselves, deceiving ourselves, into thinking things were one way. And then we realize that, it's not actually how they are. But here's the thing. It is always how they were. It's just not how we were perceiving them. So if you take the Wizard of Oz analogy, the wizard was always behind the curtain, right? But Dorothy didn't know that. We didn't know that. And so it's just like our perception shifts. So that's just something to take note of and be mindful of. The next thing is that Venus is moving direct on tomorrow, Thursday, June 25th. So she's stationing direct at 5 degrees of Gemini. And, this will have the effect of things starting to ease up in terms of any issues that we've had, any delays around, all kinds of Venusian things. So money, worth, values, relationships, beauty, aesthetic, these kinds of things that may have felt a bit stalled or a bit prickly or uncomfortable can start to flow. And it takes some time, right? It's not going to happen overnight. It takes some time for those things to start to flow more freely, to move forward. And Venus is now the morning star, and so she is kind of in her, glory more as well. So I won't say too much about that because I talked about Venus retro in previous videos. And what I really want to focus on is Mars moving into Aries, which is happening this week on the 27th on, the Saturday. So I'm going to talk about that, but I have one other thing that's happening just after that I want to mention to you first before we circle back to the Mars in Aries. And that is the fact that Jupiter and Pluto are making the second of their 3 conjunctions that are happening this year, right? So Jupiter and Pluto that have been hanging out in Capricorn for what seems like forever at this point, they are coming together 3 times over the course of this year. The first time was April 4th. And this time, it's June 30th, and those planets are retrograde when that happens this time. And then on November 12th will be the third and final time that Jupiter and Pluto will conjunct. So I've spoken about this before. There's lots of other astrologers that have spoken about it. I don't want to belabor it here, but I do want to draw your attention to it, right? This is I think of it like if you've ever skipped rocks, right? Flat rocks into a lake or whatever. Think about the rock is hitting the surface of the water 3 times, right? And that's kind of what's going on with the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction happening 3 times. So April 4th set the stage, so to speak. This particular time around, June 30th, it will be exact, right? And those planets are retrograde. So it's a bit of a rejigging or a re-envisioning or some sort of reversal in terms of whatever this means for us personally, right? So you look to the Capricorn area of your chart and what's been going on there. And then when it happens the third and final time around November 12th, that marks sort of a mastery, or we've reached a deeper level of understanding, of how to work with this energy and what it means, right? The story is kind of coming to a close. Jupiter expands and it magnifies things. And it's about the big picture, and it's about broadening our horizons. And then Pluto likes to go to extremes, right? And it intensifies everything. It can... when I was listening to a podcast by Alan White a couple of weeks ago, he was talking about Pluto, and he described Pluto as, an energy that likes to make big things small and small things big. Simple way to put it. Pluto is the symbolism of the phoenix rising from the ashes. But as you hear me say all the time, the phoenix has to burn up first, right? So a few things that this can bring about, both personally and collectively, are our powers of persuasion. Pluto's very kind of magnetic. It rules Scorpio in modern astrology. Mars is ruler of Scorpio in traditional ancient astrology. But so Pluto has this sort of like charisma, right? And Jupiter does as well. Our powers of persuasion can be quite amplified at this time, which is good, providing we use that, with integrity. And this can really favor personal growth and transformation, right? Growth, Jupiter, transformation, Pluto. And it's also, I see it as this energy of benevolent power in a sense. Pluto's power, Jupiter is a bit considered a benefic, right? So those are some of the more positive things. And then on the shadow side, we can also see this as big shows of power, right? Not like big sort of spectacles. And increased intensity around certain issues, particularly things like money, debt, power. It could be the amplification of fears as well. So those are some things to be mindful of. And the last thing I'm going to say about that is this is happening in Capricorn. Saturn rules Capricorn, right? So Jupiter and Pluto are in Saturn's home while this is happening. And Saturn's going to re-enter its own home, Capricorn, shortly. So those 2 planets are being hosted by Saturn. So with Saturn will have the effect of, offering some lessons and tests and, encouraging maturity and responsibility. So it's like we can have really big ambitions with this energy, but Saturn reins us in and says, whoa, tap the brakes. Let's be realistic here in our expectations and make sure that you're doing things in a very proper way. So that's Jupiter-Pluto conjunct. Now let's move on to the Mars and Aries piece. I'm going to show you the chart. Oh, one thing I just forgot to mention. I wanted to read something to you just briefly about Jupiter-Pluto. I'm referencing here an article by Rachel Lang, and she has a really good article on her website about this Jupiter-Pluto conjunction. So I'm going to post the link to that below. If you want to read more about it, you can. But what she says here is, we're likely to see a metamorphosis in Capricorn-related industries like banks, finance, government, and corporations. We'll likely also see changes in Jupiter-ruled sectors like religion and religious institutions, higher education, travel, international business, and faith. At this time, we could get real about the losses we've incurred throughout this pandemic. We could even see some market fluctuations as we navigate another bumpy patch of this current COVID-19 storm. On the plus side, we could see solutions for making travel safer, improving learning through technology, and coming together with other countries. So she says a lot more there, and I encourage you to read that article. So I'm going to show you the chart now, and then we're going to talk about Mars moving into Aries and staying there for a whole big long time and what that means. So here's the chart. This actually is for the 27th, which is the day that Mars moves into Aries. Eastern time, it happens later in the evening, sometime around 10 p.m. or so. But, and here we have it on the chart, right? You can see Mars at 0 degrees there, just tipped into its ruling sign of Aries. What else is going on in Aries there? Chiron is still in Aries for many more years, 7 more years kind of thing. So as Mars moves through Aries over the next 6 months, because it's going to retrograde, it's going to hit these planets, right? It's going to conjunct all of these planets, and it's going to conjunct, just let me turn the page around here. A couple of them, more than once because of the retrograde. So there's Chiron. It will hit Chiron once. Then we've got Black Moon Lilith, and we've got Aries here. So these are very, very sort of powerful female, more feminine, not female, more feminine energies, but it is the energy of the angry feminine, right? And I've talked about this before. So again, I won't belabor that, but that's a theme that we're going to see amplified, I think, as the year moves on. So the other thing I want to show you is here we've got all this still in Capricorn, right? So there's Jupiter and Pluto that I was talking about. And we have asteroid Pallas, Athena, there as well. And then Saturn is retrograding and about to move back into Capricorn as well. So Capricorn and Aries are both cardinal planets. They square each other. You can see these red lines. They're making, over the course of the remainder of 2020, there is tension here. It's very dynamic energy. So we're going to talk about that. And I think, truthfully, for the purposes of this video, that's what I really want to draw your attention to. I did mention Neptune. And so Neptune is retrograde by the time Mars moves into Aries. Okay, so I'm just looking at my notes here. So normally Mars is in a particular sign for about 6 weeks, but because it's retrograding it will be there for about 6 months this time, right? So that will be, the retrograde specifically will be September 9th to November 13th. And that'll be, intense. We'll talk about the retrograde more in depth when we get closer to that. But something to note, the last time Mars was retrograde in Aries was 1988. So if you think back to that time, the last time Mars was in Aries itself was late 2018, early 2019. But Mars was retrograde last in Aries in 1988. So I personally was thinking about this. I have a lot of Aries energy in my chart. Aries is a very physical energy, among other things. It has to do with our physical body, right? It's at home in the first house. And so when that happened, around that time, I had a couple of injuries and incidents. I had my wisdom teeth removed, and then a week later, I was working in a hospital in the kitchen, and a metal food cart hit me in the Achilles tendon and sliced my Achilles tendon. Ooh, gross, I know. And so I had to have surgery again within the week. Surgery, right? Mars rules surgery, pointy things. And so I'm really mindful of being cautious about, my physical body around this time. But just, I just wanted to give you sort of a real life example so you can think back to 1988 and think about, what specifically was going on for you. Of course, this is going to impact some people more than others. If you have a lot of Mars energy in your chart, you're really going to feel this, right? But you'll feel it. All of us will feel it in the particular house that Aries sits for us. And I'm going to get to that. So Mars in Aries will be in its home sign because Mars rules Aries. And as I mentioned, in ancient astrology, it also ruled Scorpio. So Aries being the first sign of the zodiac, a cardinal fire sign, it's very much about initiating, right? Mars is the warrior, the god of war, very driven and ambitious and, fearless kind of thing. And so Mars in Aries, it initiates, it drives forward. It is really pioneering and courageous, and very sort of direct, right? And can be quite impulsive even, and combative and aggressive, and perhaps self-centered as well. So Mars is a real dynamo. It's a personal planet. So we tend to feel the personal planets on a more personal level. And so for each of us, we're going to feel this energizing energy of Mars as it enters its home sign Aries, wherever that sits for us. And we have to be super mindful of how we connect with this energy, how we respond to it, how we use it, because it can be very good for getting things done, for head down and go for it, right? But we have to also be careful not to be too impulsive, not too aggressive, not too sort of so focused on what we want that we're not noticing what else is going on around us. It can be, an energy of like really, really kind of myopic focus on something. And which can be really good in some ways, right? Like I said, really good for getting things done. We may feel more physically energized when this happens too. Who doesn't like that? But we have to be careful of the shadow side, right? Of being combative and accident prone and, aggressive and that sort of thing. So I showed you already on the chart that Mars is going to conjunct Aries, and it will, and Lilith as well. And Aries in particular, that's the second half of this year. Well, obviously we're entering the second half of this year, but it will be exact in August, October, and December. And both, right? We know that Aries is squaring Pluto. It's a long haul kind of transit that's happening, but now Mars is going to square Pluto too. Yikes. Mars energizes and it fires up. Pluto intensifies, right? We talked about Pluto and Saturn. And transform. Jupiter, also in Capricorn, expands, amplifies, that sort of thing. So if you remember back to earlier this year, we had the Saturn-Pluto conjunction at about 22 degrees Capricorn. So Mars is going to square that exact degree in August, October, and December. And Jupiter will square 22 degrees from July 8th to 16th. And then Pluto will hit it between August and November, right? Pluto moves very slowly. So this energy here of the square between Aries and Capricorn, as I said when I showed you the chart, it can be quite intense. It can be very dynamic. Like we really want to get things done, but Saturn's going to be there, right? And these Capricorn, Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn all in Capricorn. Saturn rules Capricorn. Remember, we talked about this already. And Saturn is that energy of boundaries, of just a second, you have to make sure you're following the rules. You have to make sure, you did this right. You can't take shortcuts. Saturn puts obstacles in our way. It wants us to master things, and you cannot master something if you're rushing through it. So, and Saturn's doing this for our own good, but it can be very frustrating when Mars wants to push ahead and Saturn is pulling back on the reins, right? One foot on the gas, one foot on the brake. And so we have to be mindful of this and the frustration that it might cause. We have to take lots of deep breaths, and we have to listen to Saturn. And as frustrating as that can be, and just take the time, particularly during the Mercury retrograde, the Mars retrograde, to fine-tune the details of whatever it is that we're putting that, energy into, Mars and Aries energy, and to make sure that we are really building a solid foundation, right? Saturn. So, I'm trying to think if there's anything else specific I want to say about that. We'll come back to touching on this energy because it's so obvious and it's happening for so long this year. On the global scale, this will definitely be noticeable. We may see some increase in tension between the powers that be, Capricorn, and that individual, right? Aries, Mars energy. And there may be some tension and some conflict there. Ultimately, a square, no guff, right? Look what's going on in the world. All I'm saying is this could get more intense. It's very likely to get more intense if I'm being real and honest with you. A square is a conversation of tension. It can really result in some very powerful change and long-lasting, valuable results. But it takes some doing getting there. It takes some action on our part. Luckily, Mars in Aries loves action, right? But it has to be focused, responsible, mature action. That's the Saturn, and those other planets in Capricorn piece. So I'm going to leave you with that in terms of the overall. And right now I'm going to start taking you through each of the 12 signs. And I'm going to touch on where is Mars in Aries going to be for you over these next 6 months, and where will it be retrograding, right? In the fall. And the house that Capricorn sits, although we've talked ad nauseum about Capricorn in the past, I'll just refresh your memory as to where that's sitting for you. So where is that square happening in your own personal chart, right? So we're going to begin with Aries because Mars is moving into your sign, Aries. And this is going, first, I want you to know that first and foremost, right, rising sign is the focus here. And we're doing whole sign houses in these general forecasts. So if your chart is drawn up using a different house system, like when I do personal readings, I don't use whole sign. I sometimes look at it, but I don't use whole sign. But for the purpose of this general forecast, you will, this is where Aries is sitting for you. If you know your own personal chart, you can take a look at that, and you can see if it differs. Sometimes it will, tip into the next house kind of thing. So, and we're talking about rising sign first and foremost, and then, you can listen for your sun and your moon sign. Some astrologers say that if you were born in the evening, the moon sign may be more sort of resonant with you, and during the day, maybe the sun sign. So, Aries, sorry about that delay. But Aries, this is about, you're going to feel very energized and amped up physically, personally, very much like going for it. You may even do things like take up a whole new sort of, exercise routine. You may be pumping iron, which would be a really good way to use this energy, actually. Because the first house is about the body, the physical self, the I, me, mine. It is about how we project ourselves out into the world and how the world perceives us. So this warrior energy of Mars is moving through that area of your chart for the next 6 months. So there's a real opportunity here to harness that, right? Be mindful, though, Aries, you in particular, about, when you're doing physical activity and that kind of thing, or working with machinery or, that sort of thing, just be mindful, take your time, that sort of thing, so that you don't risk injury. And then the square from the stellium of planets in Capricorn is your 10th house. So that's career, public reputation, and persona, the legacy you wish to leave, that sort of thing, authority, your relationship to authority. And so this is where the tension is between you and that 10th house. And so, keeping in mind what I said in terms of particularly the Saturn piece there in Capricorn, how best to work with this tension moving forward. So that's for you, Aries. Next, we have Taurus, where Mars will be transiting your 12th house for the next 6 months. This can be working on a lot of issues that have to do with buried anger, unconscious sort of rage, or, even behaviors like self-sabotaging behaviors, like where you're not very nice to yourself. Working on that, doing something about that. You could be spending a lot of your energy, right, Mars, in terms of spiritual pursuits, spiritual mental health. It could be like even certain institutions that the 12th house rules, like hospitals, spiritual retreat centers, prisons, or just time in solitude and reflection and that sort of thing. And then the square from Capricorn is 9th house related, right? So that is issues around foreign people and places and what you learn from them, your own personal belief system and worldview and ideologies, issues around teaching and learning and higher education, travel, these sorts of things are ninth house. So that's where that tension is coming from that we spoke about in the introduction. Next, we've got Gemini. Gemini, Mars is moving through your 11th house for the next 6 months. This is firing up that house that has to do with friendships, groups, clubs, associations, benefactors, people that can help you reach your goals and dreams. And so there can be a lot of activity around those things, right? And just be mindful of the potential for, combativeness or aggression in those arenas too. And then the square from Capricorn is happening from the 8th house, which has to do with other people's resources, taxes, money, taxes, debt, insurance, loans, wills, these kinds of things. And it also has to do with our deep psyche, psychological wounding and healing, our intimate connections with other people. So that's for you, Gemini. Next, we've got Cancer. Cancer, you're going to have Mars transiting your 10th house for the next 6 months. So there's a real drive and a real intensity around your career, your public reputation and persona, the legacy you wish to leave, relationship to authority figures and your own authority. And so it's going to be a really good time for your career. You could be very busy, and you just have to be mindful of not using that Aries energy to be sort of combative, right? In terms of your, publicly, or your in terms of your career, that sort of thing. And then the tension is coming from the 7th house, Capricorn, and that is your one-to-one relationships and contracts and agreements. So those areas may pose a bit of tension. And you have to, harness that Mars energy and work through it. And things could slow down during the retrograde, and that can be frustrating. But, you have to work with it and take Saturn into consideration, like we spoke about in the intro. Next, we've got Leo. So Leo, this Mars transit is happening in your 9th house of your ideologies and belief systems, foreign people and places, and what you learn from people who are different from you, higher learning, college, university, any kind of higher learning, publishing, travel of the long distance variety, these sorts of things, right? And so, you could be really prone to be sort of up on your soapbox at this time, Leo, and really, your ideologies, like really verbalizing those things. But you have to be mindful to not be combative, and don't waste your energy, for example, on, arguing with people on Facebook, that sort of thing. Not time well spent. And then the tension is coming from the day-to-day, the 6th house. Your routines and your health and wellness routines, issues around health and wellness and that sort of thing, and how you are in service to others. And so this is, Saturn is saying here, be responsible about these things. This is how we're working through this tension between these two areas. So that's for you, Leo. Next, we have Virgo, where Mars is transiting your 8th house. And this is firing up that house that has to do with intimacy, other people's money, other people's resources, money, time, energy, where you are vulnerable, psychological wounding and healing, these sorts of things, right, are what's being really hit by that Mars energy. And then the tension is coming from Capricorn, the 5th house, which has to do with your own creative projects and creative self-expression, issues around children, and what sparks joy for you, right? What really brings joy to you. And so, there can be some tension between these two areas, and it's a long haul process that's going on for the remainder of this year. So use that, Saturn energy to be really responsible, right? It's like the tortoise and the hare, and Saturn is the tortoise, right? Mars is the hare. So think about who won that race. Next, we've got Libra, where we've got your 7th house being fired up by the Mars and Aries energy. And so that is your house of one-to-one relationships, contracts, and agreements. So a lot of activity can be focused a lot of energy can be put into these things, which is great, but be mindful of that tendency for Mars and Aries to be a little bit over the top, a little bit aggressive, a little combative, right? And then the tensions coming from the 4th house of home, family, place of living, roots, our emotional security. That's that interplay between those two areas of the chart for you, Libra. Next, we've got Scorpio. Scorpio, your 6th house is being fired up by Mars in Aries for the next 6 months. So that's your daily routine, your health and wellness routine, how you are in service to others, relationships between unequals. And then that is in tension with your 3rd house, which is where Capricorn sits, which has to do with communications, all things communications. It has to do with your immediate environment and the people in it. So oftentimes this is things like siblings, cousins, neighbors, your community, workmates, teammates, that sort of thing. But all things communication and mobility as well as 3rd house related. So those two areas, 6th and 3rd, are where this big, energy for the next 6 months is sitting for you. Next, we've got Sagittarius, where Mars is firing up your 5th house of children, of what sparks joy for you, of your creativity and your personal, expression sort of thing. And then that is being challenged by the 2nd house of your resources, your time, your money, your energy, your values, and your worth, including your self-worth. And so those two areas, Sagittarius, are, in some tension, and, but you can get a lot done too, right? Keep in mind everything that we've said in the introduction here and use that to your advantage over the remainder of this year. Next, we've got Capricorn. Capricorn, Aries is firing up your 4th house. Mars is firing up your 4th house, which is where Aries sits for you, of home, family, your emotional security, your roots, your place of living, this kind of thing. And then it's being squared by the 1st house of self, I, me, mine, physical body, physical vitality. It has to do with how you project yourself out into the world and how the world perceives you, right? That's where, that's where your sign is, Capricorn, squaring the 4th house of Aries. And so those are the areas that you need to work out the tension over the next 6 months. Next, we've got Aquarius, where we've got Mars transiting your 3rd house for the next 6 months. And that has to do with communications, right? All things communications, all things sort of immediate environment related. So short commutes, people in your immediate environment, siblings, cousins, neighbors, teammates, that sort of thing. And mobility as well. And then that's squaring the energy in Capricorn, which is sitting in your 12th house, which is the house of the unseen, what goes on behind closed doors, what's hidden, what's in the subconscious. It has to do with perhaps self-sabotaging behaviors, spiritual and mental health. These sorts of things are 12th house related. And so those two areas of the chart are in some tension, right? But you do have the capacity to get a lot done if you do it the Saturn way. A little bit Mars, a little bit Saturn kind of thing is what we're shooting for here. And then last but not least, we've got Pisces. Pisces, Mars is transiting your 2nd house for the next 6 months. That's all about your personal resources, time, money, energy, material possessions, what you value, your sense of worth and self-worth, right? And so you can get a lot done in that area. And then, but it's being squared by the 11th house of networks, clubs, organizations, friendship groups, people that are walking the same path as you that can help you reach your goals. And it's about your dreams and visions for the future. So a lot can happen here, but you have to be mindful of slow and steady wins the race, right? The tortoise won the race, not the hare. The tortoise is Saturn, the hare is Mars. So keep that in mind as you navigate the next 6 months, Pisces. So, okay, that's all 12 signs. And I know that was a quick run through, but we do all the, the meat and potatoes in the intro. And then that just gives you an idea of the themes that are playing out for you. Keep in mind, if you have planets around the latter degrees of Aries, like the last half of Aries, that or the other 3 cardinal signs, which are Cancer, Capricorn, and Libra, this is really going to be felt by you. All right. I'm in that boat myself, so should be interesting 6 months. Anyways, take good care, and I will catch you next Wednesday, if not sooner, on Facebook and Instagram. Okay. Take good care. Bye-bye.